and also in Westchester University, because when Dad was a part of the trustees, Professor Dinneman was here doing what he did in the university, teaching and preaching inclusion, diversity, and equity. This was before it was an acronym. They always walked the walk, and they talked the talk, and they did what they had to do to make a difference from diverse backgrounds. So together they did that. So I am proud to represent my father, Clifford E. DeBaptiste, who May 19th will be 99 years young, and who still has the heart of a warrior, just like Senator Dinneman. And I, for one, would be glad when or if he retires. That means I can retire, but how can I retire if my 99-year-old father is showing up and working every single day? I mean, just yesterday morning, we were talking about plans for the future and even building in another community. So his mind, like this giant in our community, it keeps going and going and going. Now, everyone around them are exhausted, but it's a good exhaustion because it's good trouble. You know that you have made a difference. And so just like Frederick Douglass did, and just like the visionaries who created the statue, Dr. Trotman, former Professor McJoyner, and so many who came together to say, yes, Frederick Douglass's legacy made a difference to not only the nation, but it made a difference to Westchester, to this community, because his last speech, as many of you know, was at Westchester, in Westchester University. And so we stand on those shoulders. And so today I am proud to represent my dad, number one, but secondly, I am proud because I represent Westchester University. I graduated from Westchester University. In fact, when Julie called and said what year, I had to really just kind of do the math. And I was like, well, you didn't even have December graduations then. So, I don't even know what it says on my diploma. But I graduated because I picked it up. But I stand on a university that has learned its lesson. Westchester wasn't the inclusive place that it always was. It has a history of segregation, just like Westchester, the borough, did. But it turned that around. It learned its lesson. They realized the importance of togetherness. And they said, our policy of not allowing black and brown students to stay on campus or be at the school, that's gone. And they changed their story. And they apologized to those who they had to apologize. And that's a big deal. Because so many people don't want to apologize when they're wrong. Look at what's going on in the political arena now. Not only do they lie, but they stand in their lies. They don't stand in the truth. And what the Together Endowment does is stand in the truth that everybody is important. That brown and black and white and wherever you come from, you are important to the story as well. And so the third reason I am happy to be here is because I represent Westchester, the borough. I represent the history of the borough. I represent the history of the university. I represent the history of watching my father, Clifford E. DeBaptiste, and someone I've long admired, former Senator Andrew Dinneman. I get to stand on their shoulders. And I'm heavy too. But I get to say that it is because of them that I can stand here today and I can do my part, that I can pass the torch to someone else behind me, and that I can grab the torch from those who came before me and do my part, that all of our voices are heard, that all of our voices together can make a difference. So for that, I am pleased to say thank you to the Senator for creating this endowment. Thank you for continuing your vision of making a difference in a difficult world where the conversation isn't often positive, but bringing your light, your smile, your positivity to the conversation can only have a rippling effect that we all want to make a difference together. I get to introduce you. You're not coming out without my introduction. I'm wearing a lot of hats today. I've been mayor this morning. I'm my father now. And then I have to go, keep a day job. But in the meantime, I get to introduce the Reverend Dan K. Williams, who pastors New Life in Christ Fellowship and serves as a state representative. He also wears many hats. He's going to begin this gathering and this conversation today in prayer. And then following that, we're happy to have Representative Kane here who will give remarks. And he's just an all-around good person. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I want to say before we pray that I've heard amen so much that I'm confused as to whether or not it's Sunday morning or Saturday morning. I'm honored to be in this space and honored to be a part of the celebration. Let's pray. God, our Father, we honor you today. I'm grateful that we stand in this space to celebrate not only the great earth you created, but each other. To stand in this place, Lord, and be reminded of your care and concern in providing the vision to a friend, a professor, a mentor, in the person of Dr. Andy Denham. We pray this morning, too, that you would remind us of that which is most significant, that we are your image bearers. And yes, Lord, while we celebrate our diversity, we pray too that we might honor and celebrate our sameness and recognizing that we bear your image. We too ask God to keep us empowered with the sense that the power you give to us is not a power over one another, but a power for one another. And yes, Lord, yesterday is gone. Tomorrow has not yet come. But we do have today. We do have now. And so I pray that this might be the beginning of the forming of that beloved community in a way that allows us to honor each other and to build a future that includes all of us as the only future worth building. Now may the words of my mouth, the meditations of my heart, be acceptable in your sight. Lord, you are my strength, my Redeemer. It's in the name of Christ I pray. Amen. Amen.
I think John might have had to go to another event, but I just wanted you to know that Senator Kane was here. He's my good friend, and we were so happy when he was elected. And I think Steve is here, who is representing Senator Kane, and Steve's also my good friend, who was chief of staff when I was senator. Now is doing his work with Senator Kane, and you worked at Westchester University one time, I believe.
Yes, sir.
And so we're grateful. I just wanted to explain a little what we're going to do today. And we're delighted, by the way, by the number of people who came out to the dedication. And we knew that we'd have a small group here, and we wanted to work together to put everything together. First, in addition to Earth Day, Today is a celebration in our Islamic community of Eid, and a joyous day because the fast of Ramadan has ended. And Dr. Mian John, who's a very close friend, and Dr. John and I, like Dr. D. Baptiste and I, would go from place to place together, trying to educate people, as a Jew, as a Muslim, trying to show that we can work together as one. And I wanted to, in honor of Eid, to ask Dr. John, who is, was president of Taunton Medical Society, chief of medicine at our hospital, to explain what that's all about. Dr. John?
Thank you, Andy. By the way, these are not styling. These are my prescription sunglasses. So, there you go. So yes, today is the holiest day in our religion. And I am a Muslim. And when I say I'm a Muslim, that means I'm also a Christian. That means I'm also a Jew. That means I follow all the Abrahamic religions. Most people in this country do not understand that we Muslims revere, respect, and believe in Jesus and all the Abrahamic religions. I wanted you to understand that they are very important to us. We will never, ever insult any of those religions because our religion tells us that. Then why am I here today? We have a big party going on, dancing after 1 month of doing nothing. It's because of one man. They say a politician will promise to build you a bridge when there is no river. But he's not one of those politicians. And beyond him, look at this country. Honestly, the greatest country in the world when I came to this country. Absolutely the greatest. Nobody had any doubts that America is the greatest country in the world. I've lived most of my life in this country. I've been educated by this country. I've served this country. For the last 35 years, I've served the citizens of this country. I've saved lives because I am a cardiologist. I come in the middle of night, put stents, repair hearts. But when I look at the halls of power in this country, halls of power, people that we look up to, they are each at each other's throats, literally fighting in the hallways. People are attacking our capital. It brings literally tears to my eyes because I love this country more than my own because I've lived here. And I think we are very small. Honestly, we have to be humble. Maybe we have 50 people here, but they say a river starts with a drop. We have to reach out to people. The togetherness, we have to have togetherness. We have to have decorum. We have to have decency. When there's no decency, there's nothing. Honestly, there's nothing. If you don't have a decorum, if you are accusing, calling names, using language that I have an 8-year-old daughter. Honestly, I don't let her see news anymore. Some of these congressmen, the people that should be making this country better. Anyways, this was not my job today, but I'm so sincere about it. Senator asked me about the Eid. Eid is really a celebration of 1 month of fasting. Now, fasting, when we say fasting, most people think that from sunrise to sundown, we don't eat. We just don't eat, we don't drink water. But honestly, that's a very small part of Ramadan. Very small part. Of course we don't eat. And the reason we don't eat is to show us what some of the people on this earth don't have. Because they are, I was looking at statistics, it's in billions people that don't have 3 meals a day. So that tells us God wanted us to realize that when you haven't eaten, what happens? So, of course, we don't eat, but there are many other tenets. We try to be nice to each other. We give charity. We try to show love. We don't get angry if somebody says something bad. We try to respond in a positive manner. The Ramadan starts on the first crescent moon in 11th month, which is around this time. It varies from year to year, but starts at that time. And it goes on for 30 days, during which we don't eat, we don't drink, we don't fight, we don't have impure thoughts. That's the tough one for me. So this is the time that we celebrate, and celebration is we have a big religious ceremony thanking God. And God is not Allah only. There's only one God for everybody. Honestly, we have made these divisions, but all good religions only talk of good things. So we thank Allah, we thank God, and then we celebrate. We go out, we give candy, we give sweets, and everyone of any religion is welcome to come these events and join us in these festivities. And that's really the meaning of this whole thing, to show people who do not have anything that we are there for you, help them. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody has to fast. If you cannot fast, if you're sick, if you're too young, if you can't fast, you feed 3 people, and that covers for your fast. I think I've already taken too much of your time, but if anybody has any questions, then there's presenters. I'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you so much, and have a blessed, happy day.
Happy Eid, everyone. And as we learn more about everyone's traditions, right? We grow. We see the similarities. We understand our common humanity, don't we? You know, actually, Dr. John and I bonded as a result of an event in Chester County. When I was running for office, the Muslim community gave me an award, and I went down to Lower Marion to accept the award. And my opponents, what they did is they claimed that Dr. John and I were terrorists, and that I was anti-Israel. And they put this stuff in people's boxes. But what saved the day was this interesting, speaking of commonality. Dr. John had saved the life of the Republican chairman at that time and of a current permanent judge. And when they heard of it, they stopped it. They made them take all the stuff out of the packets, and we went forth. Though one person thought that they could get away with sort of just making Dr. John using a magic marker so he wouldn't be in. You know, see, he could sue as a physician because they heard his practice. As a politician, you just have to take everything and smile. And so, we had to, but the powers that be in the party told, made sure that that was stopped as well. So this is what happens sometimes in our great nation, and we're going to stop it by trying to get everyone to understand the common humanity. So what we're going to do today, and there's a book. If you didn't get it, you get it on your way out. What we're going to do is we're going to learn a couple of new approaches to human relations, because all doesn't seem to be working so well anymore, does it? Certainly not by the amount of racism in this society. Anti-Semitism has just increased from 21 to 22 by the largest amount ever. And we live in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania happens to have one of the largest number of hate groups. And we want to make sure that Pennsylvania doesn't become the Mississippi and Alabama of the 2000s. You remember Mississippi and Alabama in the 60s. And the way we do it is by coming together. And to the best of my knowledge, when we brought every group together, it was the first time we ever sat as one, as Hindus and Muslims and Jews and Sikhs and Christians and people of all colors, the black, brown community, the Southeast Asian community, and that in and of itself is a step. So what we're going to do is we're going to have these presentations. We're going to follow the presentation instead of breaking up into groups because we're just doing that if we have too many people. We're going to give you an opportunity to ask questions, and then we're going to give you an opportunity perhaps to sit together by the area in which you come from so that you can begin to think of what you can do on the local level. And as I mentioned outside, we have a very unique opportunity right now. With the 250th anniversary to make sure this discussion takes place in Chester County, a unique opportunity to focus in on the aspirational meaning of the Declaration and take that aspirational meaning, which at that point was only for white men, and the struggle of this nation continuously has been to increase and improve and expand, hasn't it? The meaning for each and every citizen, and that's what we're going to contribute to in our work. And as I also mentioned outside, Frederick Douglass' statue sits on this campus to remind us of his message and of our mission. And as we do this today, times have changed. So we need to use the new technology, the DNA. You need to use the story in a shortened form. With social media, we need to further understand social media, and if we put all those together, I think we can really make a significance. And the key is not for us here at the university to tell a community what to do, but to allow each community to develop its own initiatives. The university it should be a font of knowledge, which it is, and but the purpose of the endowment is to take that knowledge and to share it and implement it in each one of our communities of this county, and to take Frederick Douglass and to make it a reality as well. So let's begin, and we're going to start with DNA, and we have two professors, one emeritus like me, and another still working. But together they are going to talk to us, and by the way, they have a great book called Who Am I? And that's the question we're going to try to answer. So Dr. Anita Foman and Dr. Bessie Lee Layton.
Sit down.
When we started this project, actually I started it because I was interested in the Human Genome Project, where they map the human genome. And at the same time I had been doing some diversity work and consulting. And a friend of mine, I was so interested, people used to send me articles all the time. And a friend of mine sent an article that said, looking at your DNA, that scientists had figured out about how to identify somebody's ancestry. And I thought, I bet there are people walking around who think they're ABC and they're really XYZ. And so at the very beginning of this, now 20 years ago, I thought, I'm going to test some people. And there was a grant available on this campus that was for people who had unique ideas for looking at diversity. I got a grant for $1,500. I had to find the lab that knew what I was talking about to do the DNA testing. Each kit was $450, and I tested 3 people. And even from those 3 people, and the tests were very rudimentary at the time, we started finding some things that were really fascinating. And so from that, these discussions really evolved. Bessie Lawton came in when I started interviewing enough people to be able to do statistical analysis and systematic analysis. And so Bessie really bumped up the project to the next level.
Thank you. So today, we're going to give you a brief overview of what the project is about and some of our interesting results that probably could be the fodder for reflection and further discussion. And later on, as we go into our community breakouts, hopefully we will be able to talk to you in detail about what you could do in your community settings to try and promote dialogue.
So much, as has been said multiple times here, so much of the discussion of race is really with people at each other's throats. We don't even have to go back a week to look at like the latest situations where people really were at each other's throats. And so we decided that we could use this work as a positive way of addressing conversations across race. One of the things that we, at the very beginning, where my interest came in looking at the human genome, is that every person, regardless of race, creed, or color, comes from sub-Saharan Africa. Your ancestry line goes back to sub-Saharan Africa. And so we have really laid out across the planet. So when we talk about race, it really is the human story. And when we talk about race, it really is the story of the human migration. It's one story.
Let me show you the next slide to show you how long this project has been happening. We have some of our older colleagues on this slide. And basically we have interviewed and worked with more than 3,000 respondents as part of our study. As a preview of what we do in our project, we have a protocol that asks us where we actually talk to people or have them answer a quantitative survey about what they think their race is. What do you think is a gap in your family narrative? If you took a DNA test, how might you react? Who would you share this information with? Who do you think they might share this with, and how might they react? And then we have a sample taken, send it off to a lab, and when we get the results back, we engage them again in a post-conversation to talk about their responses to the previous conversation that we had with them and to see how that has changed their conceptions of race. And we have published our results in academic journals as well as mass media outlets such as NPR and the New York Times. As Senator Dinniman said, last year we published our book called Who Am I? Identity in the Age of Consumer DNA Testing. And Anita is coming out with it.
If anybody is involved with great courses, there's a course, Who Am I? Ancestry, I don't remember the title of it, but it's on this same work, and Bessie's is highlighted in it. So take a look at that. And then in September is coming out How to Talk About Race, which really, again, is very consistent with what we've been talking about today.
So we show you some of the interesting results we've found from our study over the years.
Yes, now this is a really short version, but I just want to let you know the kinds of things that people find. This is a young man who identifies as Latino, and that's his identity, which is not really, quote, a racial group. And you can see that highlighted because look at all the things that are in his background of Iberian Peninsula, Italy, Greece, Native American, and 12 more regions. So he's connected to, everybody in this room. And just one more that we wanted to show you is a gentleman who came into our office because his grandfather is Indian, from India. And he said people don't believe him because of the way that he looks. His narrative and his family is really related to this cultural history, but nobody believes him. So we tested him, and he indeed came out with 13% South Asian, which is consistent with a grandparent. So people have all kinds of reasons to be tested.
We know that some of you have been part of our project. At this point, we would like to invite maybe 1 or 2 people if you are interested in sharing your experience with finding out about your DNA profile.
Has anybody here taken a DNA test? Oh, okay, find out anything interesting? Yeah, Jim, I'm going to come over to you. You find anything interesting?
It's been a while,
That's right.
but I've confirmed my African ancestry
Okay.
and also a lot of European ancestry.
Other people jump in the gene pool.
That's right, yes, absolutely.
And there are all kinds of narratives that go along with that.
Right.
Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, please, go ahead.
Sure, well, my father, side of the family, is from Italy. My mother's side, actually from Barbados, Great Britain. So when we talked about it, I said, well, I'm going to be half Italian and half English. And I'm part Jewish. And at some point, somebody went across the Adriatic, and we have a little bit of little Greek in there, and so it was very enlightening. And Sue had a similar experience.
Yeah, when we talked, I said, I'm 100% Italian, and you said, I love when people tell me that I'm 100%. And it came back with, mostly, I think it was 80-some%, which you said was high.
Yeah, it was.
But then the rest was.
And remember, Italy was the center of the universe, so people went through there, and a lot of times our students think there was only mixing in the United States in the last, 100 years. So it's a fantastic conversation.
Of the 3,000 profiles that we've seen, we've probably seen one or two who has 90-something% of something.
Yes, absolutely.
Some of the findings that we had, and I'll just share some of the interesting numbers that we've seen, just so we can spark some reflection on your part. One of the things we wanted to ask people is how do you think others will react to your DNA profile? And we asked them this question before and after they take the test. And you can see that before the test, people think, oh, people will react positively. They're going to like the results. But after the DNA test, the positive number drops down to 30-something%. And a lot of the other section comes up, and some of these are negative: shock, anger, they're skeptical, they don't believe, there's anxiety. We also want people to share with us, will it change your family narrative? So let's say you find something in your profile that is not expected. What will it do to your own family narrative? And we split this up into two groups based on our findings. The Europeans have an interesting response in the sense that most of them say they will either not change their family narrative, or maybe they might do some research. But compare that to people who identify as non-European, most of whom will say that they will add it to their narrative immediately, no question, or that they will adjust their narrative completely.
And Bessie and I, as people of color, like, those white people, so we have had to extend our conversation to understand how people interpret those results. Oh, sorry.
We also asked them, how do you think DNA testing will change your behavior? And we found interesting differences between males and females. And I apologize for the slides. We had this done in a Mac, and it's a PC, so I'm guessing that's why there's some funkiness going on. But for females, a lot of them would say that they're open to doing more research. That's the first thing they would do. But for a lot of the men, the males, they would say, well, I'm not going to change any of my behavior. We don't have enough sample enough people in our sample who identify as non-binary, so we were not able to include that in this comparison.
And actually, over time, sometimes the guys would come back, but it took a little longer.
And the last piece of quantitative data that I want to share with you that I thought was interesting is how people would identify before they took the DNA test. We sort of wanted to know, okay, I'm not sure if this is going to show up. Okay. The slide is kind of messed up, but basically if you look at here, this is the group of people who identify as European, and we asked them, how would you identify? And for those who would only state one single ethnicity, for example, they'd say, well, I'm white. Those are people here in this category. They would say, Europeans or those who identify as white would say, I'm just white. But those who are identifying as non-European, they are more likely to state that they have multiple ethnicities, even before they take the DNA test.
Yeah, and when people found something that surprised them or maybe they didn't like, they would say the results are wrong. One person said I dropped it on the floor, the lab must have made a mistake. Or sometimes people would say, I don't care what it says, this is my heritage, I'm 100% Italian, I don't care what the test says, which is fine. And just in general, the responses that people have, they were questioning, excited, psyched, and occasionally you'd get somebody who didn't have much in their background, and like, that's boring, I wanted to find something shocking in there. And what we would, suggest, you want to mention these?
Well, first of all, we're talking about community dialogue, right? What we want to share with you really today is a number, and I'm going to share this number. It is worth reminding ourselves of this number, even if most of you probably know this, and that's 99.9%. That is at the core of the work that we do. 99.9% is the amount of DNA that we share among ourselves. In other words, what makes us different from each other, what makes me different from you, or you, or you, is just 0.1%. And very often, we use that 1% to divide ourselves. And therefore, while we do recognize the importance of talking about our differences, we also make the claim that it is equally important for us to talk about our common humanity, as Senator Dinniman said, what we share among ourselves so that we can build bridges among each other.
And we just love doing this work because people tend to approach it with a non-defensive attitude, which is so different than how we often approach race. And then ultimately, what we really want to say is that we want people to take the challenge on of thinking about race in a different way, and we want to thank Andy for having us here today. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, we thank, whoa, there goes one. We thank Rita and Bessie for their knowledge. And, again, and we'll have a chance after the 3 presentations for you to ask some more questions. But again, the point is, doesn't this give an opportunity for the beginning of a genuine and honest discussion about difference? And in their book, in fact, they say that they want to create through this a more inquisitive, open, and respectful discussion. And so this is the opportunity. You know, in America, in terms of black and white, the majority of our population, based on the history of this country, has some black African and has some white from wherever it be. And once we admit that and understand that, change will come about because people will understand their common identity. So this is an example of a new and different approach, one that's not confrontive, because the problem we really face is the lack of a genuine and honest, and as Dr. Trotman would say, courageous discussion about race and differences in general. So how do we then create it? And that's what our goal. This is an example of what the university could share with the community and what we can do in that regard. Okay, now, we also have the opportunities to understand our commonalities through the use of this story. And to introduce Dr. Hardy, who's a preeminent oral historian in this area, and in this nation, actually, and is it. If you remember, about 15, 16 years ago, there was all this about English-only movement, and people only speak English. So I was I was still county commissioner at that time, and the Latino community asked me to come down to a session, and because it was getting a little hostile and unfortunate. So when I went in, and it's again the use of the story, I simply looked at people and said, you know, I'm not asking you to accept people speaking the language which they came with because it's right, and it is right, but I'm asking you to do it in the name of your grandfather and father. Don't you remember they spoke Italian and Polish and Hungarian at home? Don't you remember they got the worst jobs when they came to America? Those are part of the stories of your family. And actually, the movement diminished because people were able to get that common understanding through the use of a story that they knew of, that was part and parcel of their family that they had heard many times. So Dr. Hardy, help us develop this even more.
Okay. Very first radio piece I produced for WHYY back in 1981 or 80 was on English-only movement in Philadelphia. I went out there with a tape recorder and a little handheld microphone and did interviews with the folks who were advocating English-only in the schools and this course and the rest. And actually, a couple of years before that, I first begun to do oral history interviews. So I've been doing that for about 45 years now. I've done close to 500 with everybody from sharecroppers to factory workers to labor organizers to community activists to admirals, members of Congress, CIA operatives, and a former head of state. So I've done a lot of interviews over the years with a lot of different kinds of people. And the work has been extraordinarily rewarding. And what you find from doing it is just how, well, basically, the way we understand each other is through telling stories, right? This is how we make sense of ourselves and others. And now I need to get to my slides, which end slideshow. That's me. Okay, so how do we get to this? Where's? Share screen. Oh, over here. That's like a summary. Oh, right there. Oh, right here. Look at that. They were all in order. Okay. So, why do we tell stories? We are storytelling creatures, right? Through stories we tell who we are, where we come from, what we value, where we want to be, what we want America to be in the future. Through stories, we make sense of the world, differentiate good from evil, and distinguish right from wrong. Throughout American history, we have gone through repeated cycles of pulling together and pulling apart, of fellowship and division, by empathy and animosity. And today we live in one of those periods of heightened fear, conflict, and aggressive dispute. And one of the reasons is because most of the stories we hear, we get from the mass media, right? We're listening to the wrong people. So we need to refine our own voices and give people better stories to listen to. And that's one of the things that we can do through this project. We also, to start a new project, it always helps to have something to look forward to, like a big party. Shared celebration that we're all invited to, where we all get to eat the food, sing our songs, dance our dances, and share and listen to each other's stories. And this is exactly what we have in the upcoming United States Semi-Sesquicentennial, the national, state, and local 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. In 2020, Congress created a nonpartisan U.S. Semi-Sesquicentennial Commission to catalyze a more perfect union by designing and leading the most comprehensive and inclusive celebration in our country's history. How's that for a grand ambition? Anybody remembers the 1776 centennial? That didn't go off so well, so I think they have higher aspirations. And fourth, they came up with a vision, and that is the shared experience of America 250 will ignite our imaginations, elevate our diverse stories, inspire service in our communities, and demonstrate the lasting durability of the American project. Sounds consistent with the ambitions of this project, these community gatherings, yes? And here was the challenge that comes directly from the commission report. What are we going to do? We're going to inspire the American spirit for our continuing journey towards a more perfect union, right? Not focused just on the Battle of Brandywine and what took place in Philadelphia in 1776. Its themes are to educate, engage, and unite, consistent with what we're doing here. Diversity, inclusivity, and full community participation are essential goals of the 250th anniversary celebration. And the idea is to move beyond the events of 1776 to examine their legacy today and to create initiatives and programs that honor the first 250 years and inspire us to imagine what we'll be doing over the next 250. So what is this more perfect union that people keep talking about? And it goes back to the preamble to the Declaration of Independence, often mentioned, right? You hear the words, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And to that you can add opportunity, justice, right, religious toleration, all of the additional pillars of the American Creed that are enshrined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, and that we've embraced since then. America 250 has many public and private partners, one of which is the Association of State and Local History, which has put together a roadmap of possible activities for a big party in 2026. And I want to share just two of these. The one is everybody sees their story included, right? Which fits perfectly with our objectives here. And that people value history for its relevance to modern challenges. Right? American 250 Commission and its partners also tell us that our collective fight for a more perfect union and an unfinished revolution, right? That America is and always has been a nation of diverse people who feared and distrusted and fought with each other, but who also pressed for a more equitable and inclusive nation. So who then are we, the people of Chester County? And here you can see population figures for Chester County from 1930, when the county had only about 127,000 residents, and from 2022. So in the past 90 years, the county is almost quadrupled in size, and you can see the change in race and ethnicity. To me, one of the most interesting things is back in 1930, Chester County had 75 Mexicans, 11 Chinese, and 1 person from Japan. Wow. Right? What we have from the early 1920s until 1965 is under federal immigration restriction legislation. The small number of people permitted into the United States had to come from from Europe. And then when you look at how America has changed and how the county has changed since the Immigration Reform Act of 1965, which eliminated the race-based quotas, you can see what's taking place. 9.5% of Chester Countyans today are foreign-born, compared to about 13% or 6% back in 1930. 7.7% Hispanic, 6.8% Asian. You can see the percentage of African Americans in the county has gone down, but the number has, of course, increased. 2.2% identify as two or more races. Only 0.3% Pacific Islander, Native American, 0.1% Pacific Islander. unfinished revolution and the journey towards a more perfect union. And all of us have our own American stories, each of which adds new chapters to the history of the United States, right? So, the state of Pennsylvania and Chester County also have America 250 commissions, but neither of them have done much yet. Like, they've done practically nothing. New Jersey is way ahead of us, the neighbor to the east, which has already committed $22 million and started listening sessions and committed funds to historic sites and to new curriculum, which puts us here in a great position to set the agenda for the next 4 years in preparation for the big party, right? Which will be a storytelling extravaganza on the state and the federal and hopefully on the local level as well. So this is what provides us a great opportunity and clear focus for meeting the challenge set by the state, the national, and the county commissions to educate, to engage and unite, to work towards the goals of diversity, inclusion and full participation, and to document our continued journey towards a more perfect union. And one way we can do this is through a broad range of storytelling projects, which can take many forms. We can tell short stories and long stories. My background is typically with the long stories. Typical oral history interview lasts an hour and a half. For the university, I did an oral history project with former Congressman Kurt Weldon. We did 25 interviews that lasted about 2 hours each. That was the most in-depth oral history probably ever done with a former member of Congress. And anyway, they can be short and long, individual and collaborative, live and recorded. There's no playbook, there's no set rules. Members of each community have the opportunity to figure out what they want to do and how they want to do it. Right. And what subjects can we tell? Well, we've got life stories. We can focus on historical events, on sites of memory. I like the idea of doing listening sessions around the American Creed. This is you get 8 to 10 people in a circle, and you provide them a prompt, right? What's the meaning of America? What's the meaning of equality? What does freedom mean to you? And just go around the circle in short stories. And you find that people, across race and gender and ethnicity and income and class, you see what we've got in common, and not that we have different ideals, but where we emphasize differently, because these are the core values that people tend to share. And I love this one example of a storytelling project that was completed in 2020. Back in 1932, the Tredyffrin and Easttown school districts, right here in Chester County, resegregated a public school system that had been integrated for generations, right? And it was going to be, they made the new elementary school, Easttown Elementary School, for white students only. African-American parents said, we're not going to accept this. Why would we return to segregated education? They staged a 19-month boycott that achieved first state and then national attention. It played a role in the Democratic win in the gubernatorial election of 1934. And they won that fight, right? After a 19-month struggle for reintegration of the elementary schools. And in 2020, there was a dedication of a state historical marker, and there's Andy with the folks who worked on this, right? And this is part of that storytelling that we can do. So one of the things that communities might decide to do is for an event that's from the 20th century, that's related to their own community histories, and nominate a state historical marker. So, what are the initiatives and programs? We can have social media, and Deb in a minute is going to talk to you about Together Chester County. Live events and presentations, exhibits, physical or online, performances, print publications, state historical markers, the options right are wide open. Let me, for this discuss, tell you about a recent project that we worked on at West Chester University. Back in the early 1980s, I produced a radio documentary series for Fresh Air with Terry Gross at WHYY called I Remember When, Time's Gone But Not Forgotten. And I did about 100 interviews with elderly Philadelphians and produced 13 programs, a number of which were about immigration experiences. Right? Most of the people interviewed were immigrants had come from Southern and Eastern Europe and Ireland between the late 1800s and the early 1900s. At Westchester in 2016-17, we had the tapes, the old interviews digitized, transferred to the University of Kentucky, which has this major national oral history archive. And then we had students basically index the interviews, curate them, and create brief biographies and digital storytelling projects. We decided then, well, why don't we do interviews in Philadelphia, in contemporary immigrant communities? And so we had the students go to different branches of the Free Library. And now, instead of interviewing people from Italy and Russia and Austria and Italy, well, who are going to be the immigrants of the early 21st century? They were from Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, from the Middle East, from Latin America, from Asia, right? Part of this new wave of immigration to the United States today. We have more foreign-born people in the United States than ever before. It's a lower percentage than the peak of about 1910, but it's a larger number. And then what this enabled us to do is compare and contrast immigrant experiences of Philadelphians in the early 1900s and in the early 2000s, literally 100 years apart. What are the similarities? What are the differences? Andy was talking, right?
Yeah.
My grandparents, they spoke Hungarian in the home. We spoke Italian. Now we may be speaking Chinese or Arabic in the home, right? But there's the same process of assimilation, many of the same aspirations and ideals and goals, and the rest. So we got wonderful opportunities there, right? And there are all sorts of folks to partner with, right? Many hands make light work. You can't expect to be able to do this all on your own. So one of the things we'll talk about and think about is teaming up with classes at Westchester University, students to help do some of the interviews, working with high schools, AP classes, right? And then we've got archives, right? If you put in all of this work and you produce these wonderful projects, they shouldn't simply just languish in a basement on audio cassette like my interviews did for 30 years before we got digitizing this, right? So the Chester County History Center would be happy to be an archive for the interviews and the projects that are produced and presented. So that's where we are, right? What's the timetable? We've got from today to July 4th, 2026, and in fact, the commission says they'll be continuing there for another year. The next step then is to figure out what you all want to do and how to go about doing it. So great opportunities. Let's hear each other's stories. Replace the nattering, the flack and the static that comes out of our smartphones and television sets with conversations.
I think what Dr. Hardy was saying gives us a number of ideas, doesn't it? The story is a means to start that discussion, isn't it? It's less threatening than it enables this type of communication to take place about difference, because often the difference isn't different. And and as our committee was meeting, we realized the unique opportunity that's coming from 2026. And remember, this is an annual gathering, and we start out small with a small number of people, then we get bigger and bigger as we go forward and start some of the local projects. We have this opportunity, but also understand the amount of money that will be coming in for this activity. Pennsylvania hasn't put up its funds yet, but hopefully they will. The county is talking about what it needs to do. And what is happening is that this project, and through Westchester University and its foundation, is really setting the tone and establishing what the discussion will be here in the county and in the Commonwealth. Remember, our governor has focused on this matter of diversity himself. And we then have, as I say, this is such a unique opportunity for all of us in this county and for this university and for this committee of 52 in terms of the funding base, which is going to be there. And we want to work with Lincoln, and that's why I'm glad that Ava is here, and with our other universities in our region as we do this. And with every one of our groups, we have the Chinese school in the suburbs that is represented here. We want to work with the Chinese school and with the University of Valley Forge, which is a school that is out of the Assembly of God tradition, but it focuses on the training of multicultural approach because it's going all over the world in terms of its missionary work. And Cheney University, which is our sister institution, and Immaculata. And by the way, Immaculata the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart of Mary also have a branch in Peru. And so it is a strong link to us. And in fact, they have a project right now in Coatesville, which I think is quite unique, in that there is a daycare for young children, but then the parents come so that the parents can be taught English at the same time and be helped in access to whatever their needs may be. So we have some opportunity. And before we go on to the next one, I want to welcome Jim McElwain here. And Jim has been one of our contributors to make this possible too. And Jim, you should tell the story because we know, and I learned from you, that it wasn't easy 40, 50 years ago in our politics for those who were not part of the Protestant establishment to establish a base here in this county. They did, and now we want to make sure everyone else can do the same. But you see, we learned, didn't we? And we can learn from the stories of what it took then. So finally, our final presentation is to bring us up to date on terms of the use of social media and how we can use that in terms of DNA. And by the way, one of the tricks in DNA now is we're researching how we can get these tests much cheaper and creating a lab here in Chester County because then we can utilize it for many more people, and we're working with the former president of Pennsylvania Pennsylvania Life Sciences to achieve that, as well as some others in the community. But in terms of the story and the individual initiatives, we have Deb Siamaka, who's sort of coordinating everything for us and has established actually a Facebook site to help us get the discussion going. Deb, you want to tell us some of your ideas? Deb was a retired teacher from the Tredyffrin School District, former Marine, captain of the Marines. That's right.
Okay, is this on?
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Good morning.
Am I still here?
Yes.
Good. So I'm going to talk about social media. Now we're on. So I'm going to talk about social media. One of the problems in talking about social media is that the academic research on social media has not really come to a lot of conclusions. It's still a very new discipline. So what I'm going to talk about is the negative part of social media and some new ideas that we have on how to rectify that. But a lot of it's not proven yet because we haven't gotten there and it's so very, very new. So I'm going to talk about how social media has divided the country and harmed our democracy and what we can do to use this project and our social media to help rebuild our democratic institutions. And by the way, before I get started, Dr. Hardy had mentioned the Berlin school fight. Next Saturday, there's going to be a presentation at TE with the last survivor of the school fight. She was a second grade student. And they're going to talk about, this will be at Conestoga High School, they'll talk about the horrific circumstances surrounding this and the strike that happened there. And if you have an opportunity, you can register. I think it's, if you go to the TE School District website, it's on there. So I'm sure each one of you have had your own experiences with social media, and most of them maybe have been bad. And so I just thought I'd start this journey by talking about how social media has affected me personally. But, you have all had stories, back to Dr. Harvey, stories of how social media has affected your life. I can remember teaching, I taught for 20 years at Conestoga High School, taught social studies. And when I taught, I noticed a marked difference in 2010, 2011, when kids got the iPhone, right? Before then, I would ask a question and everybody would raise their hand. Well, not everybody, a lot of them. And after 2010, when kids got iPhones, I noticed a marked difference. Kids did not want to take a chance and to put their hand up and to put themselves out there. And so I had to come up with new strategies to get them to participate. So, many of us were seen as troglodytes by saying like, well, these iPhones, I don't know how good they are for kids, but we've seen them, the mental health aspects of social media and the iPhone really are coming to fruition, and we're seeing that now. In 2020, I saw the impact of social media on my campaign. I ran for state representative in Delaware County. And, I was subjected to a lot of attacks. Andy talked about some of these attacks when you run for politics. And, you can't really do much about it because you're a candidate. And so people can kind of say whatever they want about you. That was the bad part about it. Yet the good part was, because of the pandemic, I couldn't actually go out and knock doors. And so I organized a lot of my campaign using social media. That's the good part. And I'm sure you've seen some good things, for yourselves. One of the reasons that I'm on Facebook is, unfortunately, I find out about deaths and births and, events that happen. So you can't really totally check out of social media. It's very hard to do. And, in the midst of the pandemic, I took a course on happiness. I highly recommend it to you. Yale University, there's a professor, Laurie Santos, that does a great class on how to become happy. And one of the things she says is that the reason that so many kids today are unhappy, and these are both college kids and high school kids, is that they compare themselves online with everything that they see, and their life comes up short. And so social media really, I think, has been, to a large degree, and you may have seen this in your grandkids, your kids, it's a scourge, right? Because kids really feel like they don't measure up. So there's a great researcher named Jonathan Haidt who talks about the effects of social media. And he says what it has done is it has made us like the Tower of Babel, right? And if you know the story from the Bible, and some of you here probably know the story way better than I do, but the story goes something like this, that the Babylonians built this tower, and they built it really high, so that they wouldn't have to deal with it next time there was a flood. And God was kind of ticked off about this because God said, this is very arrogant, right? Why should you be able to avoid, God's wrath? And so what he did was he made the people of the Babylonians each speak a different language, right? So they couldn't talk to each other, they couldn't organize each other. And what he's saying is today is social media has made us a Tower of Babel. A Tower of Babel. By the way, I just realized that you all been sitting here for about an hour. You all want to stand up for a second and stretch for a second? As a teacher who taught kids at 7:20 in the morning, I know what it's like to sit. Sorry to subject you to this. So what social media has done is it has made us siloed into our own individual reality. Your reality is different from my reality, different from my next door neighbor's reality. And this is not good, and it does not lead to a good democratic outcome. Because we need to unite each other here, right, in our democracy. And political scientists would say that you need three things to be able to have a democracy. One is social capital. These are the bonds that unite us in our communities, right? And there's a great professor from Harvard named Robert Putnam. He's wrote a book called Bowling Alone. Have you heard of that book? And what he says is that back in the day, we used to have groups, the bowling leagues, the Moose, the JCs, right? These were groups that people of different backgrounds joined, and they created this social bonds and trust between us that when times got tough, it allowed us to communicate and to solve these problems. Right now we have record levels of distrust in the country. And so social media has exacerbated those rips in our society and has torn us apart. The second thing that we need in a democracy, we need strong institutions. We need a strong judiciary and a strong, presidency and a strong Congress. But unfortunately, our institutions have all been challenged right now. I think most of us would agree that the levels of trust in our institutions are historically low. And then finally, and this is to Dr. Hardy's point, right? What brings us together as a country and makes us a strong democracy are our shared stories. Our shared stories of who we are as a people. And right now, we can't agree on this. I know that for years we've been trying to get a common social studies standard together in the country, and right now we can't even agree what we're supposed to teach in U.S. history, never mind all our shared standards. So, unfortunately, social media has really played on all of this and has helped to rip a country apart that was already frayed. What has happened here with, in particular, look at Facebook, the idea of likes. I mean, how many people here belong to Facebook? I'll just ask. I don't know if you remember the old days. Facebook used to not have a like button. It was just a feed of you and your friends, and you got to talk to each other and see pictures of your friends and your neighbors and your family. And you only saw the people that you had joined together with. Now there's an algorithm, and it sees what you like, and it feeds you, that the same story over and over again. And it wants to, to keep that story going. And so it doesn't let you see things that don't agree with what you already believe. So it destroys in many ways. It seems like that's all I'm talking about. I'm almost through with the destroying part here in a second, right? But social media really plays to the extremes, we know that, right? So the people who are loudest, it's the far right, the far left, the people who, many ways, I know a lot of my friends say, I don't talk politics on social media anymore. I don't want to get involved. And so what we hear are the loudest voices all the time on social media. And many people would say it's kind of like mob justice. They go after people who don't seem to have the right, quote, right point of view. And we know from psychology, this is confirmation bias, right? What we do is we have a tendency to search only for the things that reinforce what we already believe. So we get involved in these silos. And I know personally, I can remember, I played lacrosse at Penn State many years ago, and I actually wound up being disfriended on social media from one of my teammates, because she had a completely different political view than I did, and she couldn't believe that I had the views that I had, and she just unfriended me. And so and maybe some of you have experienced that. It's painful. This social media stuff looks like it's not all that big deal, but it really does get down to the very personal level. So how do we counteract this? Unfortunately, like I said, the research on this is not all that conclusive.
But we need to do something to get rid of this destructive social media and to reestablish bonds in our community. What I have seen from the research that I have done is that flooding social media with positive stories is a way to counteract the negative. It seems very simple, but that's one way to do it. Another way, and this is something we teach kids, is to seek out things and seek out people that challenge your assumptions. And, I myself have tried to do that and have somewhat succeeded, but it's very complex on how to do that. One place that I think has succeeded, and I think this could be a model for what we do here in Chester County, is if anyone's ever seen this site called Humans of New York on Facebook. What it is a guy came up with stories of just everyday people. And I always say that when I was the advisor on our school newspaper for a while at Conestoga. Everyone has a story. Every kid has a story. Every person in your neighborhood has a story. Every community member has a story. And we should be telling these stories. And this guy in New York came up with Humans of New York. And what he did was he just simply stops people on the street who he thinks might be interesting, and he talks to them. And he asks what their story is. And what he does is he puts a written narrative on here. I think what would be interesting is to combine what Dr. Hardy's doing, right, and have prompts that we go out in the community and we talk to people and we do short videos using this model. And what if we did short videos all over Chester County and talked about the wonderful people, the positive people, the people who are making a difference in our communities, and we recognize them and we talk to them, right? And you flood this social media with these positive stories. So this is kind of our logo here. It's just simply the hands, the diverse hands here. These are the hands that represent all the different peoples in our neighborhoods. We can model that we can have trust in our communities for our kids and our neighbors by talking to people and having them make a difference in everyone's lives so that we get to hear the story across all these different communities. So I've created a Facebook group, and I will give you a handout for those of you who are trying to stay on Facebook or try to make it work. I know many people have just ditched Facebook. And in a way, this is kind of a bad thing, right? I think social media has a lot of bad to it. But if we totally abandon it, we left it as kind of like a cesspool, why can't we make it into something positive here? So with this group, it's called Together Chester County. That's a hashtag at the beginning there, because eventually we want to spread it into other social media outlets. I'm asking you to join this group, and what we'll do is that this social media thing that we're putting together here will really work with the other two groups here, the DNA and with the stories, and we will upload these stories that you create in your communities, and then we will broadcast these across Chester County and across Pennsylvania and across the country eventually. So we've got all the towns represented here in this Together Chester County. And this will be the thing that brings us together during this sesquicentennial, is that how you pronounce it? This 250th anniversary of our country. And just to go back to what Dr. Hardy said, there are values in our communities that have not come out recently, right? It's all negative all the time, all over social media. If you look towards the Declaration and the ideals of the Declaration, right? We're not there yet, but we're moving in that direction, right? The arc of justice is long, but it moves, hopefully, towards towards this justice. So let's reinvigorate our country with the ideals of the Declaration, with the new tools of the 21st century, and create a record going forward that Chester County can be proud of. Thank you.
Okay, well, what I think we're going to do is sort of revise part of our plan. You know, we knew on a nice, good, beautiful day, we'd have a smaller number of people who could come. And we also know that we already have made inroads in almost every community in Chester County, so we're prepared to go forward with that too. So what I think we can do is just, for 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes before we leave, is do two things, is to ask questions of any of our presenters, and to also come up with some of your ideas of what we can do and how we can move forward. And then we could adjourn. So what do you think? Who has some comment they'd like to make, or thought they'd like to add to all this, or a question? Yeah, Kyle, Pastor Boyle.
So, for those of you who don't know, Mrs. Siamaka Deb was one of my social studies teachers. Use my preacher voice. I don't really need a mic, but Mrs. Siamaka, I'll come back to you so that we can keep this thing going beyond high school. Deb, so one aspect that I haven't thought about, but I've been thinking a lot about lately, is AI. I think since 2020 in particular, this idea of fake news has arisen. But now, there are literally bots that can make you and I think that a story is accurate when it's not. So, I'm just curious, given all the good information that you shared, how we continue this very important idea of hearing, telling, sharing stories, while competing with a world in which stories can, at a fingertip, be fabricated.
Well, I think that's why, I think that using, look, I know there's fake videos. Thank you. I know they're fake videos, but I think that when you have a story that's recorded and that we share that on Facebook, I don't know, maybe we need the blue check from Twitter, But to me, if you're interviewing someone from a community and you're having a story and they're sitting, I don't know, in an iconic area, let's say Phoenixville or Westchester, right? And they're sitting in front of it. To me, that verifies that they're in their time and their place, and that they're telling their story, in their community. And can we ever, like, stop this AI stuff? I mean, it's really, really scary. I mean, I think we've already know that, social media has been full of CRAP to a large degree. And honestly, I think we have to rely on the government to really, look, for years we allowed cigarettes to be sold to our kids and nicotine to addict our kids, and nothing happened right then, and not until fairly recently were the cigarette companies held accountable. I think there has to be accountability for the social media companies, and they have to be regulated. But until then, right, I don't think we should just sit back. I think that, like I said, flood this with positive stories. I dare people to try to infiltrate this with bots, because we'll screen it. But, I'm not totally ready to give up on this yet. I think that, rather than just have narrative videos, stories are a really good idea.
Okay, and others' questions. There's a concept called cultural lag, which is the inability of societies to keep up with change. And that's what we're facing now, and we're also involved in the greatest rate of change in all of human history. And one of the questions is, can we as humans survive it? And that's why the commonality of the human experience. That's why what the notion that 99% of our DNA is the same, that the story of ourselves and our ancestors keeps us alive and well, so we can dig all the jive, right? Stay alive. And that's why what we're talking about is not only unifying ourselves, but facing this new technology and facing AI. You know, we're the information revolution, the social media revolution is about over. But we never figured out how to counter its impact in terms of cultural lag. What are we going to do as the AI revolution comes upon us? How are we going to keep our humanity? So really, as we approach 2026, right, there are really two questions. How do we come together as one? And how do we use the technology and the social media and these advancements to be constructive, not destructive of what we're trying to do? Are there other thoughts and questions that people have? Yes, go ahead. And Deb will give you the microphone, or someone will give you the microphone. And tell us who you are. That will help us a bit.
Thank you. My name is Chris Keller, and I'm with Orion Communities out of Phoenixville, and so pleased to be part of this conversation. A couple of thoughts. I think there's a real place for us to be cutting edge with the technology. So AI's here. Let's go figure it out. We got to go use it. So in that vein, do we have a QR code? Because when I look at this for donations, there we've got it. And then we can put it in this book, and we can put it on Facebook, and also that we can get more funding. What's the process, and who are you looking for to do DNA samples? How much is it costing? What are the targets of the number of stories, the number of DNA samples, the number of videos, the number of, and what can we do to help out?
Well, Anita or Bessie, if you pass the microphone back to them, we can go from there.
We want to find out, obviously, my ideal is anybody who wanted to be tested could be, and everybody's got a story. I'd love to link all, these elements together. And so one of the things that we're working on with Andy's leadership and others is to find out how cheaply we can get this done. And we would love to have students being involved in doing the DNA scanning and all of that. So there's a lot to say. Do you want to add something?
Because you mentioned students.
Hi everyone, I just want to say this is a great opportunity, and I really am thankful for all that are present and for the opportunity for me to be present with my kids. I'm a teacher, I'm a first generation immigrant, but my kids were born here, so I'm very passionate about educating our future generations because they are our hope. You mentioned the students. I'm an educator. I teach at Green Valley High School, and I'm constantly thinking about how I can educate my students so that they're going to make a difference in our world, not just be somebody that consume all the products that are created by humans, but also be creative and innovative and make our world a better place for everyone that live on this planet. So I would love for the opportunity to bring whatever we can bring to, I teach mathematics. And when you talk about the DNA and, I love history, I love science, I love mathematics, and I think they all need to work together because they can't be on their own because they really are all connected. So I hope that we'll be able to bring opportunities to Green Valley students in the future. Working with Dr. Capitola, who's very open-minded. I think it'll be awesome for our students in Chester County as well as, for them to really go out and spread the words that we need to work together and put all our power and energy and brain together to make our society a better place. So thank you.
I think that we thank you for that, and let me just add one thing. You're right, we have to figure out how to, today, problems, including the human problems, are so complex that you do need to put all the disciplines together. And at this university, about 20 years ago, we said, we're tired of the Humpty Dumpty version of education. Remember, he fell off the wall? and they broke into pieces because our students were taught this subject, that subject, and no one ever put it together again. And so one of our efforts is to put knowledge together, to put Humpty Dumpty back on the wall, and to see and to empower students. I want to give great praise to Dr. Ferrantino and his leadership, and as well as others here, because what this university is doing, its signature now is to empower students to know they can make change and to give them the knowledge and the confidence to do so. And that's what a university education and high school education is all about. And in addition to diversity, this is a very special signature now of an education from Westchester University. And it's very unique. I also want to note Larry Dowdy, who's been here for many years at the university, and was at Cheney. He established an institute on this campus, or the Multicultural Center, through his funding and the other funds that were raised from the students. And so we want to thank Larry also for Joe Wilson back there had a question. Joe, or a comment? Go ahead. And Joe's a member of the Lincoln University Board of Trustees.
Yeah, and Doctor, I just want to say we need to bring the young people here. They need to learn the things that Cheney and Lincoln and Westchester, to think about all the future they have. I mean, I'm just amazed at some of the things that our students say about life. And so I just think we need to get some kind of reach out, even Delaware Valley Community College. I mean, we just need to go get that involved, and I'll gladly work with that.
Well, that's one of our objectives. One is to make sure young people come with us on this. Sometimes young people have more insight into all this than those of us who are sitting here.
We did run a big DNA project with Cheney.
Okay.
Matt, you want to say a couple of words about what you're doing?
Well, one second, Matt. You'll be next, but let me get right in back of you. Hi there.
Hi there.
Good to see you, Robert. You were a
Dr.
student at Westchester.
Denman, I have 4 classes with him. I have an easy question. Do you have a standard release form as we take these stories so people can sign off so we don't get sued?
Yeah.
My background is risk management, so is there a form that you used when you were taking these stories?
Depends upon who I was doing them for. So yes, Westchester University has a release form. I think that a lot of that would depend upon where they're going to be archived. But that's something we will still need to work out.
That's something we probably should
Yes,
look into, because
absolutely.
if we start taking these stories,
Yes.
people may change their mind.
Yep.
Well, we thank
We do have a
Robin,
standard
by
release
the way,
form.
for her good work. You were a member of the Progressive Institute, were you not?
Keystone Research Center, we studied economic, empowerment and diversity, and, make sure people did research on ensuring people had a livable wage.
And she was on the board of that research institute. Also, Robin, her father was the first African American on the Avon Grove School Board. Carol Black grew up in West Grove as well, and has been a lawyer. And I believe you were head of the Chester County Alumni Association for Lincoln, if my memory serves me right. So we have some very people of great experience in Chester County, and who can help us go forward. And Anita, didn't you live in don't you live or have in Judge Alexander's house? His what?
The sister, one of the Alexanders.
Yes, and a lawyer, Mr. Alexander, and his wife were 2 prominent lawyers who were involved in Difford in a school boycott representing the African American community, and won that case.
Refurbishing.
Oh, you're refurbishing us. And so, just wanted to, yeah, you know, what we have to do is try to make all these connections. Now, Matt, I think you were gonna say something. Why don't you pass this back?
I can project. I did some theater, so I can do that. My name is Matt Pirlot. I'm in the philosophy department here, and the comment about getting the students involved, I think Charlie kind of pointed over. Zach Wooten and I, a colleague here on the university, we were part of the Interfaith Meaning Making and Spirituality Project, which has been sponsored by Tracy Ray Robinson, who's done so much for diversity and inclusion on our campus. And part of that project is to make a space for students and for faculty and staff to have conversations around faith, around the difficulties that they've encountered because of their identities, and also to learn about different faiths that maybe they haven't been exposed to. And one of the upcoming projects we have related to that is this summer we're going to start to develop a podcast around Chester County leaders, in a history of Chester County, leaders in the faith communities. Folks who have done something that has really been impactful to that community, helped that community to get over some obstacle or get included in something. So we're going to be reaching out and trying to find folks who have those stories that are really important to where you're coming from, and document that and be able to tell that story in podcast, using the students to help to do the interviews so that they do get to share those stories. So if you already are right now thinking about things like, oh, I would like this story to be told, I'll reach out. Senator Dinniman has been a supporter of this, and we're really glad for all of this today. So hopefully there'll be a way to contact. I've also already gone to the Facebook page. I just want us to be able to I think it's a great thing that so many people here are connected. And if we can leverage that to continue these conversations, so many possibilities will come out of that. So that's all. Thank you.
No, that's excellent. Chuck,
Sue and I have to leave for another event.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for this. I want to thank everybody. The key question is where we go from here, and certainly the university is committed to be a major part of this. So
Thank you.
all very much.
Thank you. I don't think here's your microphone. I know you don't need it.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am very honored to be a part of this initial celebration of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm Jim Trotman, for those of you that I don't know, and I was a faculty member here for more than 30 years, and I had really the privilege of, with other team members, of starting the Frederick Douglass Institute here, basically because we discovered in the classroom that Mr. Douglass had given his last public lecture on this campus 19 days before he died. I still get chills when I say that, because it brings such an intimacy of the iconic Douglass into our lives. But there are a couple of things that this has been just so stimulating, Andy, and just a couple of things that I want to say. One is that please remember for your children and your grandchildren that what made Mr. Douglass famous was his own autobiography. The narrative, and this goes back to what my colleague Charlie Hardy was speaking about. The narrative, it's entitled "The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave," written by himself. This book was a game changer. And if any of you have reservations about the power of the story, just look to Douglass's life. It was a game changer, because up until that time, in most instances, the stories of the slaves were never told. They were never asked, because they were not considered to be a part of the human family. Douglass's story changed that. And it reminded me of my experiences here at Westchester. And one of the things that I always marveled about in my department, the English department, was that we had people who were teaching from all over the globe. We had Africans, Europeans, South Americans, and one of the gaps, it seems to me, in our overall curriculum was that we really never explored the impact of their experiences in a culture that was not originally theirs. Do you understand what I'm saying? That if you are from Ghana or Nigeria or from Sao Paulo, tell us about the impact of the Declaration of Independence on your thinking about the experiences that you had. Excuse me, the pollen has just knocked me out. But it just seems, for those of you who want to take away many things from this, one of them I hope you take away is the power of the narrative in our lives. The way in which our stories do count. Because of all of the celebratory notes about Mr. Douglass, one of the things he simply said was, I count. I'm a part of the human family. And my story makes me real. So again, I want to thank Senator Dinniman for this wonderful concept, this idea. And it seems to me that the teachers and the professors in our lives can benefit from being directed to thinking about the impact of their cultures on this culture and how they respond to it. So thank you, Andy, very much.
Thank you. You were going to add to our discussion. Here we go. You were a professor, not here, but at Penn State.
My mother was a graduate of this institution when it was a normal school. That's my only connection. I wanted to go back more than 250 years ago and represent a group of people that are not represented here, the Lenni Lenape.
Absolutely.
They influenced William Penn. He learned more from the Lenni Lenape that people recognize. He borrowed ideas from them about democracy. Their women were honored and did most of the work and ran many, many different things within their community. They were recognized and honored. And I think there's something back there that we could go back and capture in one of your stories and bring some of those beautiful ideas forward and use them as models. And today the Lenni Lenape have storytellers. They are really very good at telling a story, whether it's short or whether it's very, very long. And I think we could use some of that as maybe a model to stimulate some discussion and to recognize this has been going on for a long time. Many of the Lenape today are hidden amongst us and aren't recognized. But they're here, and their story is a powerful story.
Well, I think that's an excellent suggestion. In many cultures, a story. In African culture, it was more of an oral tradition than it was a written tradition. And those stories, I was blessed to have John Blasingame as one of my professors, who showed how those stories were a means of resistance, and those stories that others didn't simply understand. And so the use of this story and within its cultural context, and you know, really, when you think about cultures, every culture has to ask the same 100 questions because we're all human beings. They just give different answers to it. you know, America tends to be a direct culture. During the time I spent in Guangzhou, in Guangdong province, that was a very indirect culture. I mean, people would look at the sky and I'd say, that's a pretty cloud, and someone would then tell me the story of that cloud and go back to the ancient Chinese mythology, and it would take a while. But the point is really the same, the use of space. There's a wonderful book by John Hall that shows, and let's just show you for 1 second. I just need 2 people here. I'll tell you, Charlie, since I know you, and Anita, come here. Jessica, yeah, I know you too.
It's going to be proximity.
Yes. Now, in American culture, we speak to each other. The rule of thumb is the distances that you can put your thumb in another person's ear. But in Latino, so that's the distance. But in Latino culture, you see, informal cultures is only 6 inches apart. So try to be 6 inches apart. And that's very different, wasn't it, than when you stuck your thumb in someone's ear. And so how a whole conversation can be destroyed by the dance, because you don't think about the distance you are from someone else, do you? You do it automatically. And so there's so many ways that we just simply have to learn about culture and what culture is. Gopi, Indian culture has some, it's also rather indirect. You don't really tell someone something. Am I right? It's more roundabout, as is many Asian cultures. So, there's the famous story of when the Chinese took down, on the mainland China, took down an American plane. And we said we were fine because the plane was still in international space. But in China, there was a slogan that said, don't get caught in your neighbor's watermelon patch, because that would mean that you were going to do something wrong. And so the Chinese said, we're not giving you the plane back. And we said, we want our plane back. But both were arguing about distance and what it meant, you see. You know how it was solved? It was because neither party wanted to create a big uproar on it. The United States issued a statement which said that the Chinese had apologized, and the Chinese issued a statement that was not an apology. And so you see, it's in our everyday lives. It's just what these things mean and how we understand them. And so part of what we have to do is help people understand this. When this campus was being integrated, and I remember back, because I was here, it came in '71, and that's why, and because of tensions, we had created this 1-credit human relations course. Well, the rule here was that a party had to end at 12 o'clock. And the African American and Latino students said, what the hell are you talking about? That's when we begin. It was a different concept here. And some of the parties then didn't have to end at 12. It was one of many kinds of things that the campus had to adjust to and understand. You were here back in those days. And so you see, part of it is just getting to know each other and understanding each other and how we go about it. And by the way, it's one of the more exciting things in life, because when you see how another culture can answer the question differently, then you no longer have to follow your culture that you were brought up with and trained. You now have the freedom, you're now liberated to answer and respond in your own way. And also, if you're, go ahead, yes, sir.
Did I cut you off?
No, you did not at all. I want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, right, okay. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Kubi Yushu. I'm with the Mainland Chinese Culture Center, where the Senator Tin has been a strong supporter for us for years. I have a comment on urbanization. For the social media, David just mentioned, We all have a left and right extremists. I think, you know what, this is funny, I think for most of the ordinary, decent people, we either pissed off or get upset with social media, we give it up. But if you give up, doesn't mean someone else is going to give it up. The extreme is going to give it up. So my observation is that when you notice that there's a posting, right, who get the most hate, you know, in terms of algorithms, the extreme posts get most of the, you know, the clicks, liking, support. But for some good stories, decent stories, you know, total humanity stories, you know what, we always think, oh, this is a part of the normal life. We expect that, you know what, you just say, hey, I'm not going to bother with it. But actually, you know what, if every time you see a story of humanity, you click a like in it, you share it, that's a story. So that's the very easy way, you know, you make a habit. I'm going to search for a good story. Story of humanity, story of immigration. I'm going to click like it 10 times if possible. Just you know, that's a strong statement. That's a statement from your living room where you're sitting. You don't have to go out on the street and shop. You know, like we, you know, the 2022 last year, we did a lot of, you know, rallies on the street, you know, to protest and, you know, racial injustice and hatred toward Asian Americans. We are very upset. But the fact is that, you know, you can do rally and voice your, you know, your opinions, you know, at a gathering like this. But it's a small scale. You know, social media is here, especially with the artificial intelligence. Oh my God, imagine that, the fake story out there. It's going to overwhelm all of us. But you know what? We're the majority. I still believe the majority. We're decent people. We're outnumber the extremists. So, you know, we need to unite together, you know, to voice our opinions, let them hear it. What I also want to say that I want to commend Senator Dinniman to start this foundation and this idea. Talk about the leadership. You know what? He's a senator for years. He served the state and the community. We all know about it. But he has a true leadership. I think my observation for this country is that we lost the leadership. We have no leadership. Look at the Congress. Look what they're doing every day. You know, you elect them, you pay them, they go out there, you know, some kind of style, you know, like an entourage. What how they're doing for us? The country has to be detoured.
Thank you.
But the only way to do that as a country of immigration is share our stories. This is the route. It's going to crack the tour, the direction of the country. My reflection for the last 3 years, especially during the pandemic, that the racial hatred toward Asian Americans. I mean, the extreme story that, you know, the Asian seniors are being pushed down toward, you know, on the upcoming trip. That's, you know, very extreme. That's a lot of hatred. Where the hell did that come from? You know, how could Americans, one American, have that much hatred toward other Americans? You know what? One of the reasons maybe they don't know the story. We don't share the story with each other. When we tell the story, you know what? We believe in our commonality is more than 99.9%, actually. So in other words, if we hear those stories, we will develop natural respect for each other. It's just another person. Just like in nature, flower, trees, grass, all live in harmony. That's what we are, human beings. That's what we are. If we have the story here, that we will make it community better, a country a better place for all of us. Thank you, we appreciate it.
Thank you. And hopefully, I do have, I still haven't gotten the right pronunciation of your last name after I've known you for all these years. And that's another thing. Most white Americans can't pronounce names that are over one syllable.
That's okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Andy. Senator Dinniman has been a great supporter of the Indian and the Asian communities. It's been an honor for me to be involved with him in many of the events that we have held in the Westchester, Exton, Downingtown areas. And he's been a great supporter for that. You know, I mean, we were trying to spread the diversity, the sponsorship, the equality aspects to schools in India as well as in Asia, just to enable students who didn't have the ability to gain knowledge or go to a school. We had sponsored over 100,000 schools in those areas, and that's been tremendous because education kind of, enlightens people and basically, helps us look at different ideas from different perspectives and helps us look at different people. And essentially, this is a great endowment. I would love to be involved with it. This is just an idea and a proposal, Senator Dinniman. I mean, it'll be great if we try to get people together through events like a multicultural diversity entertainment event, because all our entertainment is going to be so different. And it'll be wonderful to, see that and experience that. The other thing we could do is have a, multicultural diversity picnic. Just get a park, get people together, because that is what it is. That's what brings us all together, and once we are in it, it helps us recognize each other, know each other, and basically celebrate each other. So, these are just some ideas, and I'm sure the Westchester University, as well as Senator Dinniman's foundation, can greatly help us, sponsor some of those events. Thank you very much.
And it's interesting. I learned at Indian celebrations that men can get flowers too. I learned that there's that when you come as a special guest, there was like a what is it called? That you're given around your neck.
Like a shawl.
Like a shawl, and I was used to the Jewish tradition of the tallis, that you would wear, but not in the shawl, and that were very beautiful. And so you see, there's so much that you can learn from that. And I will one second. And I learned in China, what was funny is that Americans would come and thought they could come in and do business in 24 hours. But the truth was, you had to stay for a long period of time and drink green tea until it came out of your ears before you were judged. In other words, there was an engagement period. But once that bond was fine, it lasted. Unlike in America, where it's almost like pardon the expression, a one-night stand and no engagement, and the bond is broken. All right? So there's some wonderful differences that we experience. Yes, please. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Tracy Robinson. I serve as Vice President for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Westchester. And I wanted to just share something that's happening here at Westchester and then add a comment maybe as far as the next step, thinking about the 250th anniversary. The alumni were mentioned. And so we have a wonderful faculty member here at Westchester, Dr. Heather Holy, and just like Matt mentioned with the interfaith and meaning-making community, one of the things that she is doing and leading, which is just tremendous in partnership with the Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, is this summer we will be inviting members of federally recognized tribes to Westchester to be a part of what is now a pilot for a tribal specialist training program. And because it's affiliated with Westchester, it makes it an accredited program. And so many anthropologists around the country are struggling right now to take remains out of museums and off people's shelves and return them to their homelands, including Pennsylvania, which does not have any federally or state recognized tribes. And so this program will allow them to have specialists who can assist them with the return of those remains. And so this summer, we know we will have at least 2 to 6 individuals from up to 3 tribal communities, including the Delaware Tribe of Indians, And we have been in communication for about a year and a half now with at least 3 of the 5 recognized tribes of the Lenape who have been displaced from Pennsylvania. So I say that to say that there are inroads that start even this summer to continuing to welcome those members of that community back to Pennsylvania, right? And thinking about what that looks like for the 250th anniversary, for storytelling and other kinds of things. The other comment that I would just add to this is many people have been talking about the concept of restorative justice as well in the area of DEI. So it's like DEI, JB, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice. And so this idea of restorative justice, and there are restorative justice practices. And so I would encourage some thought around what that could look like in terms of community building. I'm a social psychologist by training, and so I can tell you telling stories of race are challenging. They're often, many are painful stories. So thinking about, so I connected when you said, hey, I may change my mind about having this narrative out there, right? That could happen. And so I do think that there are a lot of wonderful stories to tell, but I also think that we have to deal with the pain that comes along with telling some of these stories and think about what restorative justice might look like. Thank you. And I cannot thank you all for being here too, because this is tremendous. It's making me think a lot already about 2024, 25, and then we'll get to 26. Dr. Brenda Allen will be our Frederick Douglass D. Baptiste keynote speaker October 5th of this year. And so ensuring that we are strengthening our connection with Lincoln, with Cheney, and with the greater Chester County community. Thank you, Senator Denneman. You continue to raise the bar for us to think about what this looks like and what these continued partnerships and dialogues look like. So.
Thank you, Dr. We at Westchester are very fortunate to have that Dr. Robinson who left North Carolina and came to Westchester. And one of her professors was Dr. Ridley, who was an early African-American professor when I first came to Westchester, and who was very influential on this campus in its early days. Remember, Westchester at one point only had about 3% black students, and some of the tensions rose when we went to 8 and 10% in the early 70s. Now Westchester is probably the most diverse university in the state system. It's also the largest in the university system and the most vibrant and successful, thanks to the good leadership we have. Well, let's put all this together in this way. That what we will do is we've got some great ideas. We're doing a video. There are a number of people who have been watching us on, because it's been streamed, you know, been watching us that I know of. And I think our next step then, and Deb Siamaka has been kind enough to volunteer to help coordinate this. We now have our not a website, but we have a Facebook site, and we have a website through Dr. Robinson's office. Now our next move would be to try to work on local communities. And we know, I see Alice Hammond here, who's the president of NAACP in Westchester. And I think there's great interest in Westchester, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
And we have also great interest in Coatesville and Phoenixville, of course. Phoenixville has already done much of this, right, Teresa?
That's right, yes.
And and that will be our next step, okay? But you know, you have to bring things together. As several speakers have said here today, the good fortune that when we formed this in 3 years, we're going to have to start to get real on the Declaration of Independence. And when we started this, I didn't think of, and other members of the committee didn't think about 2026. Dr. Hardy helped us understand what was coming down the line. So what we have now is a wonderful opportunity. Using this and setting the tone for what we do in the county and the Commonwealth, and indeed even in the nation. Because someone has to set the tone of the conversation as to what the aspirational Declaration of Independence means and how we make it a reality for each and every American citizen today, right? And so one way to end this is you know, in the old days, at least, and I'm old enough to remember, we would come together with "We shall overcome," right? Well, we'll go through a couple of verses of it. I think the thing on the end is you know, it's what's it? We shall overcome someday. I do believe. And on the last verse, let's change it to "We do believe." All right, because it's the we who's going to allow us to overcome, right? So why don't we all just come up here for a second, so that we can do this? We can't do it with everyone out there. Come on up front. And then that's how we'll end it. In fact, I have an idea. If we can make it come on to the stage.
I didn't know this song.
Everyone come on up here. James, do you have a good voice? You remember.
I'm having a rough time here.
And I think in the slides that you guys have these verses. It's under my presentation. And I don't know where it was. Come on up. Come on up.
I know that. He's going to want. It's true.
Alright, so let's get together once you're here. Let's make this, we have to make a circle. Starts here. Oh, it's up on the screen. And you'll be able to read the first verse is a typical verse, and then the second verse is a sentence. I have a great idea. Just stay up there and you put the song, and the song you can see right on the screen to yourself, okay? Just stay up here. Everyone just stay up here. You don't have to be and Bobby, and come on up the stairs. Bobby, you can stay down there. Come on. All right. Now, we are committed, right? We are the group that this whole job to stay alive, right? We understand that we have to be done and give in return, right? All right. So now what you have say, right?